Hello and welcome. Today we explore one of the most powerful promises in the Bible, God's covenant with King David. It's more than ancient politics. It is the foundation of biblical hope for a just ruler, enduring peace in a kingdom that will never end. Let's dive in the life of David and discover what this divine promise means for him, for Israel, and for us today. So, when you look at the covenant with David, we classify it as a royal grant. The story of David of this covenant begins in 2 Samuel 7. David now, king of united Israel, desires to build a house for God. But instead, God tells David that he will build a house for David, a dynasty. Okay? This is what scholars call a royal grant. Covenant, a gracious and conditional promise from a sovereign to a faithful servant. In this case, God's promise. He promised to David a kingdom. David's authority and throne will be established. 2 Samuel 7, 8 to 10, other verses there. A dynasty. His descendant will rule after him, and his house will endure forever. 2 Samuel 7, also in verses 11, between 11 and 16. This covenant lays the groundwork not only for Israel's future, but for the hope that would stretch far beyond the borders of any earthly nation. The climax of the covenant history in the entire Bible is related to the covenant of David, because it doesn't stand alone. It is the culmination of a long history that began in Genesis. The promise of God to the woman's seed, Genesis 3. This promise narrowed to Shem, then to Abraham, then to Israel, and then to the tribe of Judah, and finally in the tribe of Judah to David. All this leads to one central figure, the Messiah, the anointed king, who would fulfill every covenant before him. So when we look at the covenant of David, it is the climax, also the fulfillment of the Abrahamic covenant. The covenant with David brings the Abraham covenant promise into a clear focus. First, the land. Abraham was promised land from the river of Egypt to the Euphrates in Genesis 15. Under David and Solomon, this promise begins to take shape. David ruled between Egypt and the Euphrates. According to Samuel, 1 Kings 8 and Chronicles 9, 2 Chronicles 9 also. The Davidic kingdom marks the height of Israel's territorial reach. That's called in the Hebrew Bible the All Israel, the Kol Israel. Okay? Second, David is related to the Abraham promise through the word seed. The phrase, your seed after you, in the Hebrew Bible appears only in relation to Abraham, Jacob, and David. In the chapter 17, 35 to 48, and 2 Samuel 7, and 1 Chronicles 17 in the Bible. Okay? The expression that will come from you, from yourself, from your own body, is used exclusively with Abraham, Genesis 15:4, and David, 2 Samuel 7:12. This intentional echo links the two promises together, showing that David's descendant, the covenant, is the fulfillment of the covenant made with Abraham. So, when you look at this covenant of David, we also see this universal mission like was given to Abraham. This covenant is not just national, it's universal. Psalm 72 describes the coming king as one through whom all the nations will be blessed, echoing Genesis 12, verse 3, the call of Abraham. In 2 Samuel chapter 7, verse 19, David called this covenant a Torah for all humanities, a teaching, a law of God for all humanities. In this phrase reads the global scope, like Psalms 2, 72, 110, which portrays David as the heir, as a righteous ruler who will bring justice and peace to the whole earth. Okay? Another element important of the David covenant is Jerusalem, the city of the great king. It is another legacy that is related between David and Abraham. David selects Jerusalem as Israel's capital. He brings the Ark of the Covenant to the city. And this is the city where happened the sacrifice of Isaac, uniting political, spiritual authority, and prophetic elements. Deuteronomy 12 said that God would one day choose a place to place his name there, to dwell his name. And David's choice of Jerusalem fulfilled that vision. Later writings, for example, like 1 Kings to Chronicles and Psalms, refer to Jerusalem as the city of God, okay? The city that he chose to anoint his king, the place of the presence of God and the place of blessings. Psalm 122 celebrates Jerusalem as the Lord's resting place and the center of his kingdom. The core themes of the Davidic Covenant. Let's summarize the main elements of God's promise to David. First, a descendant. A future king from David's line, everlasting. This is a promise. David will have a descendant, will rule forever. And he have an everlasting kingdom, one that would extend across all nations. It's universal, it will be eternal. The other element important in David's covenant is Jerusalem as his capital, as the center, as the throne, as the place of the throne of the king, but above all, the place of the throne of the great God. The city has both political and spiritual emphasis. These three themes, king, eternal king, kingdom, all the earth, and the city of Jerusalem, become the most frequent subjects of messianic prophecy in the Hebrew Bible. The longing for a righteous and eternal ruler grows out of this covenant. What happens when the kingdom falls? But what happens when the dynasty collapsed? When Jerusalem is conquered, the monarchy is broken, terminated. That's when the covenant becomes a beacon of hope. The prophets begin to speak of a future king, a branch of David who will reign in justice, restore what was lost. Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Zechariah all point to this coming ruler. And the New Testament opens with a genealogy, saying that Jesus, the Messiah, is the son of David, the son of Abraham. This connects him directly to the promise. He's born in Bethlehem, David's hometown. He's called the son of David by the crowns. In Revelation, he's the root and the offspring of David who reigns forever. But even outside the Christian tradition, the Davidic Covenant continues to inspire hope in a world ruled by righteousness, not violence, a kingdom of justice, compassion, peace. So, when you think about this covenant of David, what does it really tell us today? It speaks to us about leadership. Leadership matters, especially leadership rooted in God's justice. It speaks that God's faithful, even when history seems uncertain, that hope is, God is there. Hope is not lost. Even when the kingdom falls and power fades, it gives us a vision of a king who defends the vulnerable, loves justice, brings peace that endures. So when we long for a better world, for the leadership that leads rather than harms, that heals, instead of making us feel bad, for unity instead of division, for peace instead of war. We are longing for the fulfillment of this covenant, the covenant of David. Thank you for joining us, and may your heart be filled with hope of a coming king who reigns not in force, but in faithfulness, not in pride, but in peace, and reigns for you.